All right, guys, we are going to do some cell notes. So these will help us throughout this whole unit. So you'll want to keep hold of these because you may want to refer back to them off and on throughout this unit. We'll especially use them in the upcoming project that you guys will use, that you will do. These will help you out a lot. So I will label the cell here in a second. I'm going to go through with what all these parts do first. And I know right now it's kind of tedious. We just have to get through this part of knowing what they do. All cells have certain things in common. Then we have what's called eukaryotes versus prokaryotes. So my prokaryotes have a ribosome, cytoplasm, DNA, and cell membrane, but so do my eukaryotes. That is all the prokaryotes they'll have. So I'm going to write this. This is prokaryotes. This is all that they have. That's my bacteria. Now our cells are called eukaryotes, and that's because they have a nucleus. Not only do they have this stuff from above, ribosome, cytoplasm, DNA, cell membrane, but they also have all the rest of this stuff down below here. Then I have a section that plants have only. Now plants have more than just those three things, but these are the three organelles that only plants have. We do not have. All right, so let's look at ribosomes that all cells have. Ribosomes make proteins. And I know that the cell section can be boring and tedious, and it's just a lot of information, but it really does help you in the long run as you get older. And I don't know, if I feel like you start to hear of people having more issues, going to the doctor. Sometimes babies are born with issues, and a lot of that goes back to your cells and if something's wrong with a part of your cell. So it's good to know what these things do and how it all works together, because it is what's making you work and what makes you able to write and think and do all that right now. So ribosomes make proteins. Now this is important to us because our whole entire body is pretty much made of proteins. So anytime you need to replace cells, it's your ribosomes that are allowing this to happen. Cytoplasm is just the gel-like material inside. It kind of helps hold things in place. So hold organelles, which all of these are considered organelles. The next one's your DNA, another super important part because that is your genetic material. And it is your blueprint. It makes you you. It's why you have a certain color hair or a certain skin tone or freckles, or can you roll your tongue or not. It also tells your ribosomes what proteins to make. So that's how they work together. Now your cell membrane is the outer ring around your cell, and it lets things in and out. So that is my bacteria. That's our bacteria. That is all they have. They have those four things. Now they may have a flagella or cilia, which we'll talk about later on, but as far as inside of the cell, that's all they have. Now eukaryotes have those four things, but now they have these things too that our prokaryotes or our bacteria do not have, which prokaryote, just no nucleus. So we have a nucleus. So the nucleus is the control center. This tends to be one of the few things that students come in as freshmen remember. They remember that the nucleus is our control center. It kind of controls what happens. It controls when things are made, all that good stuff. It's where our DNA is at, so it holds our blueprint. The nucleolus is also inside of the nucleus, and it makes ribosomes. So you can see right away, we always are constantly making new cells. You guys, from the time you were a baby to however big you are now, and boys, you're still growing, and some of you girls might still be, you're making new cells. You constantly need to make new blood cells. You need to know how to do that. Well, you can see here that your nucleolus has to work in close proximity with the ribosomes. They make ribosomes, and then your ribosomes make the protein, and of course your DNA is telling it how to do all that. So what I'm really going to work on with you guys is making sure you know how all of this plays together. All right, so the nucleus tells us when we need to make things. It holds our DNA. Our DNA tells the nucleolus, hey, you need to make some ribosomes. Ribosomes make proteins. So then our mitochondria. Without our mitochondria, none of that happens. You don't make new skin cells. You don't make any new cells. If you pull some hair out of your head, you don't grow new hair without this, because the mitochondria is our powerhouse. It makes energy. Right? So you eat, and if you were to eat and your mitochondria weren't there, it would be pointless. You would eat food, it wouldn't matter what you ate. Your mitochondria have to be able to use that to provide you with energy. Right? If the mitochondria aren't working, it doesn't matter if you eat or not. So you need the energy to be able to build your proteins and do all this stuff. Now the Golgi apparatus, it's going to process and package. Alright, just like when you guys, you do something, maybe you give a lab report and then you give it to me and then I look it over and I kind of tell you, maybe you should have changed this. I kind of process it and I package it and I tell you how it could look better. Or maybe you did amazing, so I can look it over and tell you guys, hey, you did great, everything looks good. The Golgi's doing that too. It's processing these proteins to make sure they're how they should be. Now the lysosome's really important too. It is, I consider it like Lysol, the cleaning material, because that's what it's doing, is it's cleaning the cell. It is breaking things down and cleaning. Once again, if my lysosomes do not work, and there are some major diseases that babies can be born with, that if their lysosomes don't work, that can cause a baby or a child not to live very long. So if your lysosome is not working, your ribosome, everything else is going, but eventually you're not breaking anything down. It's like if nobody ever took the trash out of this classroom, eventually you would have trash overflowing. It would be unhealthy, it'd be unsanitary, eventually it would. I mean, think about that. If my whole 11 years here, the trash had never been taken out, could we even sit in this room? So that's what's happening to your body if your lysosome's not working. And there's, like I said, there's several diseases where that happens. The ER, or the endoplasmic reticulum, it is transportation. So once your protein is made, it doesn't have little arms and legs to swim through the cytoplasm. It gets put into like a little transport. It's called a vesicle, and it's a little bubble, and it gets sent around the cell. Now it will get sent first to the Golgi, so it can be processed, but then the Golgi will send it out too, but it does move around the ER and gets transported to the Golgi. So without the ER, it never gets to the Golgi. It never gets transported there, and then we never make our protein. So, like I said, if you shaved your head, your head would stay shaved forever. You would never make any more hair. Now you have two types of endoplasmic reticulum. You have smooth, which has no ribosomes on it. And we don't talk too much about that. It's a detoxification, and if you take biology too, we discuss the smooth ER a little bit more. In beginning level biology, we usually just talk about the rough, which has our ribosomes, so it's really important because not only does it transport, but it has these ribosomes on there that make proteins. Now eventually we have cytoskeleton. Cytoskeleton does a ton of stuff. If you take biology too, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it gives structure to your cell. It's almost like a skeleton. So I'm just going to put that right here, skeleton. It has like little tracks on it, so you get your transportation, your vesicles kind of move along these tracks at times. It also, part of our cytoskeleton works when we're making new cells in mitosis. It also is, if we have cells that need small single-celled animal cells, they have flagella or cilia, so we have cilia in some of ours. That's cytoskeleton also. All right, and then lastly, plants. Now plants have this other stuff in their cell, and we'll look at that, but they have three things that we do not. So as humans, we do not have a vacuole, and that is just gives storage to plants. Now mostly water, so I'm going to write H2O here because that's what mostly is in it. So when you see these things, they're usually big blobs that take up most of a plant cell, and they're usually blue. The chloroplast It will give plants energy. Through photosynthesis. So it's a lot like our mitochondria, and the fact that it does that. Now, plants do have some mitochondria too, but their chloroplast is what the photosynthesis, when photosynthesis happens. The cell wall is just a rigid structure, the outer cell wall. It's the very outside of a plant cell. We do not have it because we have skeleton, and we don't need those cell walls. The cell wall allows plants to stand up tall and not fall over. So it's rigid, it gives structure. All right, so that is the note part. Now we're going to go up and we're going to label the cell up above. Now eventually what I would like you to do, if you remember that pre-test you took for me towards the beginning of school, the very first question on there was to draw a cell and to label the parts, and then at the bottom it said, write a paragraph explaining to me how all these parts work together. Well, we're going to work towards that. We're going to work towards having you guys feel comfortable being able to write that all down and not really have to think about it, where you just kind of know. And then also knowing the parts, knowing what they are. All right, I'm going to clear that out. I'm going to go back up to this drawing. I'm going to do the top half first, and then I will move it up and do the bottom. I'm just going to work my way from the left to the right like I'm reading this. Now this little guy here, right here, you don't need to know. I'm going to go ahead and write it down here, but you don't have to. You do not need to know what this thing is until like the next section. They are called centrioles. You will not be asked that on anything here coming up, but it's part of your cytoskeleton. And they are used during mitosis and meiosis. So we'll talk about those later. All right, this next line right here, this is our DNA, our genetic material. They're all the squigglies inside the nucleus. So I'm going to skip one real quick. So this is our nucleus, where my DNA is inside of it. Now inside of my nucleus is also my nucleolus, making my ribosomes. Remember, without these, I cannot make ribosomes. Without ribosomes, I cannot make a protein. And that is the main goal. The main goal of our cell is to make proteins. Okay? It continually needs to replace dead or damaged cells in our body. And we grow. You guys are growing right now as kids. So we're constantly producing new cells. So that nucleolus, you guys are probably, yours is probably working a little extra harder than mine. This next guy here, this is my lysosome. And you'll see them, it doesn't mean they have to be right here. If you can see, there's a few throughout the cell here. Here's another one. But you can see these little dots inside. These little dots are junk that it is breaking down. It's cleaning the cell, it's breaking things down. When that doesn't happen, you get a buildup of stuff in there, and the cell dies. And it becomes toxic also. All right, this arrow right here is my smooth ER, my smooth endoplasmic reticulum. If you notice, there are no dots on that one, no ribosomes. That's why it's called smooth. Once again, it's used in detoxification. We won't talk too much about that. In biology too, we do. So your liver is going to have a lot of smooth ER because your liver detoxes. All right, this down here at the bottom, this is our Golgi. Sometimes you'll hear it called Golgi apparatus. Sometimes you'll hear it called Golgi body. Either way is fine. So Golgi is processing and packaging. So real quick, I'm going to walk through some stuff here. My nucleus right here. So when we try to write this paragraph of how this all works together, I start at my nucleus and work my way out. So what I have is I have a nucleus that contains instructions for my DNA, right? And it contains instructions on how to make proteins. Okay, so my nucleolus gets instructions on how to make ribosomes. So they make the ribosomes, and then my ribosomes get instructions from the DNA on how to make a protein. Once that protein is made, my ER will shift it around, it's transporting it around, and eventually it forms this little vesicle, this little bubble that will come and attach to the Golgi. The Golgi then processes it and makes sure everything is okay. And once it knows everything is okay, it it outside of the cell to do work somewhere else. All right, so it just depends on what it is. Maybe it's new skin cells, so it needs to go out and form a layer of skin tissue. So anyways, that's what's happening here. Now, there's these little things like lysosomes. The lysosomes help this all work by cleaning up after this process. All right, and then let's look at a few others. I've got my rough ER, which I just talked about during that whole breakdown of how this all works together. My rough ER, which is transporting. I know these next two lines are a little hard to tell, but this is a ribosome. You have them on your rough ER. You can see the little dots around there, but they're also just out in the cytoplasm. So they're hanging out there also. So you have your ribosome, which is making your proteins. This right here almost looks like there's a dot, but it's just meaning cytoplasm, which is just giving the inside of your cell a little structure to hold those organelles in place. So they're not just kind of floating around and bumping into each other. This line right here is my cell membrane. It is allowing things to come in and out. So your stomach and your you eat, it goes into your stomach, and then your intestines get a hold of it, and your intestines start breaking things down, and even more, and you've got blood vessels that run all through there, and they're picking up nutrients, and they're delivering them to cells. When those blood vessels get to a cell, it may let certain nutrients inside the cell, and also when your proteins are done, your cell membrane will let some things out. Now, water can move in and out as it pleases, so your cell membrane kind of decides who gets to come inside and who doesn't. We have a mitochondria. I was talking about how all of this works together, starting from the nucleus, not going out to like a protein leaving, but none of that happens without the energy from a mitochondria. If you don't have any energy, then you're not making a protein. All right, and then lastly, this is also another piece of the cytoskeleton. Like I said, we won't do much with that, but if I were to show you the whole entire cytoskeleton inside this cell, it would look like a mess, and we wouldn't be able to label the other parts because you would have lines running all through this cell. Like I said, they're almost like little subway rails where vesicles and things can move around on them, and it's giving us a little bit of structure. All right, so anyways, that is our cell notes. Fill these out, send them back to me so I can make sure that you've done it, and I will give you some points, participation points for filling those out. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you guys or talk to you guys later.